Chapter 1. The Boy from Fox Street. There are certain mornings in the Bronx that feel like God is showing off. The light comes in sideways through the gap between the buildings on Fox Street, cutting gold across the fire escapes and turning the pigeons pink for exactly 6 minutes before everything goes gray again. Ezra Osei had lived on the third floor of 1142, Fox Street for all of his 17 years, and he still wasn't used to those 6 minutes. Every single morning he thought the same thing, that if a painting could breathe, it would look like this. Then his alarm would go off, and the world would remind him that beauty was not a plan. He sat up in the narrow bed he'd slept in since he was 4, the springs complaining beneath him as though they too had somewhere more comfortable to be. The room was small enough that he could touch both walls if he spread his arms. One wall was covered in a carefully organized arrangement of index cards, verses, quotes, and what he called his God thoughts, the things that came to him during prayer that felt too important to forget. The other wall had a single window, the one that caught the morning light. On the shelf above his desk sat his Bible, worn through, spine repaired twice with electrical tape, margins crowded with his handwriting. Next to it, a dog-eared copy of a career counseling pamphlet that listed, in optimistic bullet points, all the ways a young man with drive and discipline could transform his circumstances. Drive, discipline, transformation. He believed in all three. He just needed a door to walk through. Asterisk. The kitchen of the Osei apartment smelled, as it always did in the mornings, of burnt toast and Grace. Grace, because that was his mother's name, but also because the word described her exactly and completely. Grace Osei stood at the stove in her nursing scrubs, already dressed for a shift that didn't start until 7. She worked at Calvary Medical as a home health aide, which in practice meant she spent her days helping other people's aging parents while her own mother, back in Ghana, grew older without her there to see it. It was the kind of sacrifice you didn't talk about, because talking about it didn't change it. She was singing when Ezra came in. Low, under her breath, a hymn in Twi that he didn't know the words to but knew the feeling of. It was the same song she sang when money was short, when the landlord left threatening notes, when she was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She sang it like a hand on a wound. Morning, Mama. She turned and looked at him with the particular eyes of a mother who memorizes her child constantly, the way other people memorize scripture. You sleep? Yeah. Properly? Mama. The Lord did not design human beings to stare at ceilings until 2 a.m., Ezra Emmanuel Osei. She had a habit of deploying his full name like a verdict. I was praying. She turned back to the stove. That is a very convenient answer. He sat at the kitchen table, which was covered in what his mother called her administration, bills organized by urgency, a church bulletin from Sunday with a verse underlined in red pen. Ezra pushed a corner of it aside to set down his glass of water. Did the agency call back? The silence before she answered was its own answer. They said the coordinator is on leave. They will call when she returns. That is what they said last week. I know what they said last week. He didn't push it. They needed money. He was 17. These were the facts in front of him. What he didn't tell his mother was that he'd also been applying on his own. He'd answered a listing on a domestic staffing board, one of those old-fashioned ones still printed on actual paper, pinned to community bulletin boards at laundromats and churches. The listing had said, household assistant needed. Upper East Side residents. Serious applicants only. Discretion required. He had typed his application at the library on 161st and mailed it with a stamp borrowed from his English teacher, because the listing gave only a P.O. box and no email address, which felt like something from another century. That had been 2 weeks ago. He had almost forgotten about it. Asterisk. The letter came on a Tuesday, thick, creamy paper, no return address. An interview. Thursday. 2 p.m., an address on East 74th Street. He looked up at the sky, which was doing absolutely nothing remarkable at that moment, just sitting there, blue and enormous and indifferent. Okay, he said to it. The sky didn't respond. But he felt, very quietly, in the place behind his sternum where faith sometimes lived, that something had shifted. Asterisk. He didn't tell his mother until Wednesday night. She was sitting at the table reading her Bible with the lamp pulled close, glasses low on her nose. He set the letter on the table beside her hand. She read it slowly. Then again. Then she took off her glasses and looked at him. Upper East Side. Yeah, Ezra. This is East 74th Street. These are not small people. I know, Mama. You must be respectful. You must be completely professional. You must not let how they look at you change how you carry yourself. Do you understand what I mean? He did. It was the same thing she said every time he walked into a room where people were going to assume things about him before he spoke. Be so composed, so warm, so undeniably present that the assumption has nowhere to land. Yes, Mama. She picked up his hand and held it between both of hers. She closed her eyes. He watched her lips move. He didn't hear the words, but he knew what she was saying. He always knew. Amen, he said softly when she was done. She opened her eyes. Not quite certainty, not quite fear. The place those two things meet in a mother who has learned to trust God with the things she cannot control. Go. Present yourself well. And remember who you are. Who am I? She looked at him the way she always did when he asked that question, like it was the most important question in the world, and also slightly annoying that he still needed to ask it. You are Ezra Osei. You are loved by God and by me. That is more than enough to walk into any room. He nodded. She kissed him once on the forehead like she had since he was 4, and went back to her Bible. He sat there for a long moment in the warm lamplight, listening to the city outside, and thought, okay. Let's go. Chapter 2. The house on East 74th Street. East 74th Street between Park and Lexington was the kind of block that made you feel like you'd accidentally walked into a magazine spread for a lifestyle you'd never been told existed. Ezra stood at the corner for exactly 45 seconds, doing what he privately called his reset. 3 slow breaths, a short silent prayer, shoulders back, chin level. It was a ritual his mother had taught him, refined over the years to fit the specific kind of internal gathering required before entering spaces that were not designed for people like him. The building was a townhouse, 5 stories of cream limestone with iron railings and window boxes that still held late autumn flowers, maintained by someone whose entire job was probably keeping those flowers alive. The brass knocker on the front door was shaped like an eagle. The front steps were pristine. He'd worn his best clothes, dark navy trousers his mother had pressed the night before, a white button-down collar shirt, the good shoes polished twice. He looked like a person who had made a genuine effort, which was different from looking like a person who belonged here. But it was what he had, and he was going to walk up those steps with it. A woman opened the door, 40s, efficient-looking, precise posture. She looked at him with an evaluating gaze that wasn't unkind, but wasn't soft either. Ezra Osei? Yes, ma'am. Right on time. Come in. I'm Helen, Mrs. Van Holt's household manager. He stepped into the foyer and almost forgot to keep his face neutral. It was not that the house was flashy. It was the opposite, the kind of wealth that had stopped trying to announce itself decades ago. Wide plank oak floors, warm and dark. Walls hung with paintings that looked old enough to have been purchased directly from the artist. A vase on the hall table held white flowers that cost, he estimated, more than his mother made in a day. Everything was cream and forest green, smelling faintly of cedar and something expensive he couldn't name. They passed through a hallway lined with family photographs, captured in motion, on yachts and in foreign cities and at dinner tables with wine and laughter. He caught a glimpse of a dark-haired boy about his age, grinning at the camera with the ease of someone who had never once worried about where he would sleep. Then they turned a corner, and Eleanor Van Holt was rising from a chair to meet him. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She was not what he expected. He had expected ice, the cool, assessing stare of old money in movies. But Eleanor Van Holt was also smiling, and the smile reached her eyes, and she extended her hand with a directness that felt like genuine welcome. Mr. Osei, thank you for coming. Please sit down. Helen brought water and biscuits and disappeared. Your application letter was impressive. We don't often receive applications that quote the book of Proverbs. He felt a small flush of embarrassment. In retrospect, that had perhaps been a risk. My mother always says that wisdom is wisdom whether it comes from school or scripture. Mrs. Van Holt's smile deepened slightly. Your mother sounds like someone worth knowing. She is. The interview was direct and warm. She was genuinely curious about him, school goals, how he handled difficulty. He answered honestly, including the hard parts. Money was tight, he worked to help his family. He'd never done this specific work before but was a fast learner. He felt, around the 20-minute mark, that she'd already decided and was simply being thorough. He was right. The role would involve general household assistance, running errands, being available for tasks, occasionally accompanying family members to events. You would be paid weekly, above standard rate, with flexibility for your school schedule. That would work. Thank you. There's one more thing. Her tone shifted slightly more careful. We have a son. Sebastian. He's your age. He can be particular. He doesn't always warm immediately to new people on the staff. His behavior is not a reflection of your performance, and if there are any issues, you come to me or to Helen directly. Is he difficult? She looked at him with an expression between amusement and exhaustion. He's 17. And brilliant. Which is a combination that can be trying. I understand. He did, in a different way than she meant. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He started the following Monday. His first 3 days were quiet. He learned the house, learned Helen's system, learned where things went. He was good at making himself useful without getting in the way, a skill poverty teaches early and thoroughly. He had not yet met Sebastian. He had heard him, though. Music at odd hours, not club loud but focused, piano runs that stopped and restarted with the intensity of someone working at something seriously. Footsteps at 1 a.m. The fridge at 2 a.m. He'd constructed, from these sounds, a picture of someone restless and contained. Someone who moved through this beautiful house like a person trying not to be found in it. He met Sebastian on Thursday. He was in the kitchen unloading groceries when the door swung open, and a boy walked in and stopped at the sight of him with the expression of someone who has walked into their own kitchen and found a stranger in it. He was tall, taller than Ezra by 2 or 3 inches, dark hair that had clearly been cut at some point, but was currently ignoring that fact, and dark eyes that were almost uncomfortably direct. Basketball shorts, a worn Princeton sweatshirt, phone in one hand, basketball in the other. He was looking at Ezra the way Ezra might look at a math problem that had appeared on his desk without explanation. You're the new one. Not rude exactly. The observation of someone who hadn't yet decided how to feel about it. Ezra said and held out his hand. Sebastian tucked the basketball under his arm and shook it. His grip was straightforward, no performance. Ezra noted and appreciated this. Sebastian. BAS. Nice to meet you. BS opened the fridge and stared into it with the blank expression of someone whose mind was elsewhere. Do you play? Basketball? No chess. Yes, basketball. Some. He pulled out an apple, closed the fridge, looked at Ezra again with that direct gaze. You're from the Bronx. It wasn't a question. Ezra held the expression on his face carefully. Fox Street. Yes. I went to a tournament in the Bronx once. Deegan Recreation Center. You know it. Played there every Saturday for 4 years. Something shifted in Boss's expression. Not warmth exactly, but an adjustment. Like a lens turning to focus. Huh, he said. Then he took a bite of the apple and walked out. Ezra watched him go and thought, okay. That was fine. That was actually fine. He didn't know it yet, but that 17-second exchange was the beginning of the most consequential friendship of his life. Chapter 3. The Proposition. It took Sebastian Van Holt 2 weeks to decide he liked Ezra Osei. This was fast for Sebastian, who had a practiced skill of not deciding about people, keeping them hovering in a pleasant uncertainty where they could not disappoint him because he had not yet committed to expecting anything from them. It was not cruelty. It was the armor of a boy who had grown up around people whose warmth was often strategic, who had learned early that in his world, friendship could be a form of politics. But Ezra was different. Ezra was different because he didn't try. He showed up and did his job and was exactly the same in every room, with Mrs. Van Holt, with Helen, with the gardener, with Sebastian. He didn't perform upward or downward. He just was. And when he spoke, what he said was direct and usually funny, and occasionally so honest it made Sebastian pause. The first real conversation happened on a Friday evening when Sebastian came home in a visible mood, the particular mood of someone who has been asked to perform a version of themselves they find exhausting, and found Ezra on the roof terrace, which was not where staff usually were, because technically staff didn't go to the roof terrace. Ezra looked up from his phone and said, without blinking, I know I'm not supposed to be up here. The light was insane, and I had 3 minutes before Helen needed me. I'll go. Sebastian looked at him, then at the city. The sun was doing something extraordinary to the skyline, turning it that particular shade of amber that happened in October and made Manhattan look like it was lit from inside. Sit down. Don't go. They sat in silence for 4 minutes. It was the most comfortable silence Sebastian had experienced in recent memory. Bad day? Ezra asked finally. Is it visible? Little bit. Sebastian was quiet for a moment. Then, because Ezra was somehow easy to be honest with in a way that felt involuntary. I was called into a meeting today with my father's business associate. My parents want me to go to Whitmore, study economics, eventually work in the Van Holt Foundation, which is a charity that mostly functions as a tax instrument. I have been told this is my future. What do you want to study? Music. Composition. That's what you're doing at 2 a.m. Sebastian looked at him, surprised. I can hear you from the guest room. Don't stress. I can't hear the actual notes. Just that you're working. It sounds focused. My parents think music is a hobby. Something you appreciate, not something you do. That's it? Just I'm not going to tell you they're wrong. I don't know your situation. I also don't think you came up here wanting me to validate the thing you already believe. You know what you want. Sebastian stared at him. You're weirdly blunt for someone who works for my family. Your mother told me to be professional. She didn't say I had to be dishonest. Sebastian made a sound that was almost a laugh. After that, they talked most evenings. They discovered they were surprisingly well matched. BS was wry and quick, with a wide-ranging intellectual curiosity that had nothing to do with status. Ezra was grounded and observational, and said things that landed with more weight than you expected. They also discovered they both played chess at a competitive level, which led to a series of games so intense that Helen had to ask them twice to stop taking up the kitchen table. *****. The proposition came on a Sunday, 3 weeks into November. Ezra was in the study organizing the mail when Sebastian appeared in the doorway with an expression Ezra had come to recognize as the face he made when he had an idea he hadn't fully screened for good sense. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not immediately say no. Those are the words that precede nothing good, Ezra said without looking up. Hear me out. BAS closed the door and sat down. He ran a hand through his hair, always the signal that he'd been thinking about something for more than an hour. My parents have an arrangement. There's a family called the Beaumonts. Old Manhattan money. His daughter is 17. Her name is Celeste. My parents have been engineering for us to meet for basically a year. They want us to connect. They're very overt about what that means long term. And you're not interested. I don't know her. I've been basically told she exists and that I should like her, which is the single most effective way to make me not like someone. What does this have to do with me? BAS paused. In the pause was the specific quality of someone who knows what they're about to say is a lot. There's a gala. Next Saturday. My parents expect me to go and make contact with Celeste. Properly. Make a good impression. Okay. I'm not going. Then tell your parents that. I can't. There's a recording session. With Garrett Lowe, he works with the Manhattan Conservatory. He's doing a workshop with 6 students and I got in, and it's the same night and I will not cancel it. But if I tell my parents, they'll make me. Ezra was very still. Sebastian. Hear me out. I want you to go. As me. The words sat in the room for a moment. Ezra put down the mail. He turned fully in his chair and looked at Sebastian Van Holt with the expression of a person whose brain cannot find the correct response file. You want me to? Just talk to her. Just make contact. My parents won't be watching the whole thing. I just need someone to have a brief, polite conversation with Celeste Beaumont so that I can truthfully tell my parents I made contact. How is that truthful in any way? Broadly truthful. Bah! You carry yourself well. Better than me, honestly. You're articulate and charming when you want to be, Anne. Stop. Stop flattering me while you're asking me to do something insane. Bah stopped. Then quietly. The recording session is the only one. Garrett Lowe leaves for Berlin in December. I've been working toward this for 2 years. I know how this sounds. But I trust you, and I don't ask things of people I don't trust. Ezra looked at him for a long moment. He thought about what his mother would say. A lie, even a small one, is still a lie, and truth is not a garment you can adjust for the occasion. He thought about the gala, a room full of people who would know, within 30 seconds, that he didn't belong. He thought about Sebastian, who was the first person his own age in a long time who had talked to him like a person and not like a category. If I do this, I want to be clear that I think it's a terrible idea. Noted. I'm only doing it because you're my friend. Understood. When this goes sideways. When. You're taking full responsibility. Absolutely. Ezra shook his head. He could feel himself agreeing. He looked up at the ceiling briefly, in the way he did when he was not quite praying, but was at least informing God of the situation. Fine. One conversation. Brief and polite. I'm not pretending to be you specifically. I'm just not correcting any assumptions. That's the same thing. I'm aware. I'm choosing not to examine that too closely. Later that night, Ezra sat on the edge of his bed and opened his Bible, holding it without reading it for a while, not looking for a verse but for the steadiness the weight of it gave him. Then he prayed honestly, the way he always tried to. He prayed that God would keep him from making a mess of things. He prayed that the truth would stay close to the surface, even when he was trying to keep it submerged. And then at the very end, he prayed that Celeste Beaumont, whoever she was, would turn out to be dull and forgettable. God, it turned out, had other plans. Chapter 4. The Gala. The Metropolitan Benefit Gala for the Arts was held in a venue so grand and old that the room itself seemed to have opinions about who entered it. Ezra stood outside in a borrowed suit, Sebastian's, adjusted by Helen with a needle and thread, who told him with brisk satisfaction that he looked fine. He did not feel fine. He felt like a person wearing a costume in a play he hadn't auditioned for and hadn't read the script of. He had given himself 2 rules for the evening. First, be polite, be brief, make the contact, leave. Second, don't lie. Don't volunteer information, don't claim things, don't perform. Just be present and allow the setting to create whatever assumptions it created. This was, he recognized, a very fine distinction that a theologian might have strong feelings about. He squared his shoulders, took a breath, and walked in. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The inside was everything the outside had promised. Chandeliers the size of small vehicles. Tables dressed in white linen with tall candles. People who all seemed to know each other in the overlapping way of people who have inhabited the same social ecosystem for generations. A waiter moved past with a tray. Ezra took a glass of water. He identified the Beaumont family within 3 minutes, because B.S. had described them. Silver-haired patriarch, elegant wife in blue, their daughter. He stopped. He had expected someone polished and pleasant, someone you'd have a polite conversation with and describe afterward as nice. Celeste Beaumont was standing beside her parents, speaking to an older couple with the attentiveness of someone who had been brought up to be present in conversations even when they were dull. And then the older woman said something that made her laugh, a real laugh, not the polished social kind, but a sudden bright thing that changed her face entirely and was gone almost immediately. Ezra stood very still for a moment. The word that came to him, involuntarily and slightly uselessly, was luminous. Then he thought, okay. Brief and polite. That is all. It took him 20 minutes to find a natural opportunity. He positioned himself near the edge of the room and waited. Stillness, patience, the art of not forcing things. His mother had taught him, you could move through the world gently if you learned to wait for the right moment rather than creating moments. The Beaumont parents were drawn into a conversation across the room. Celeste drifted toward a display of photographs, images from the charity's history, old Manhattan, black and white. He walked over. Not too fast. Not so deliberate it would be obvious. He stood next to her and looked at the same photograph, a group of children in a park, 1960s, laughing at something outside the frame. The photographer had a good instinct. He waited for the real thing instead of staging it. She glanced at him. Then back at the photograph. How do you know it wasn't staged? The kid on the left is mid-sneeze. Nobody stages a sneeze. She looked more carefully. Then she laughed. Not the sudden bright laugh from before, but a quieter, surprised thing. You're right. That's very obviously a mid-sneeze. Makes the whole thing more honest, I think. She turned to look at him, and he met her eyes, which were dark brown and perceptive in a way that made him feel, briefly, that she was reading something in him that he hadn't meant to show. I haven't seen you at one of these before. I don't come to many of them. Are you a Whitmore person? The first dangerous moment. He navigated it carefully. No. I'm associated with the Van Holt family. A recognition crossed her expression. Ah, she seemed to be thinking, that's the connection. Oh, I know of them. Our families are, she stopped, aware of how it might sound. It's a long story. You were about to say your families are connected somehow. Is it that obvious? Little bit. My parents are very invested in connections. Strategic ones. Does that bother you? She was quiet. Then, sometimes. Mostly I understand it. But sometimes I just want to meet someone without knowing in advance why I'm supposed to like them. He felt this suddenly very sharply. He felt the irony of it in his chest like a stone. That seems like a reasonable thing to want, he said quietly. I'm Celeste. Ezra. Just Ezra? Just Ezra works fine. She smiled, warmer than the laugh, less sudden. The kind of smile that settles. Do you want to get away from the main room for a minute? There's a balcony. It's cold, but it's also not this. He should have said no. Brief and polite, that was the rule. Sure, he said. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The balcony overlooked a courtyard and beyond it, the city, millions of lights going in every direction, the skyline doing what it always did, which was be overwhelming and beautiful and indifferent simultaneously. They stood at the railing in the cold and talked for 45 minutes. He couldn't fully account for it afterward. He had gone in with 2 rules and a plan, and the plan had dissolved the moment she laughed at the sneeze in the photograph, and what replaced it was just conversation. Real conversation. The kind where you keep saying something and the other person responds in a way that makes you want to say more. She told him she wanted to study literature, but had been told politely and repeatedly to study something practical instead, that literature was a pleasure, not a plan. He felt the echo of a different conversation in a kitchen on Fox Street and said nothing about it. He told her he loved music and cities and early mornings when the light was doing something unusual. He told her about the index cards on his wall. He told her, and this surprised him, he hadn't meant to, about the 6 minutes of gold light on Fox Street. She listened in a way that was completely still. That's a beautiful thing to have noticed. It's what's there to notice. Most people look at the same things every morning and don't notice them. I think maybe I notice because I know it's not permanent. Our building, that street, things change. Things don't always stay. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't parse. That's a very honest thing to say. He thought, if you only knew. Her phone buzzed. A small expression of resigned duty. I have to go back in. My parents will be looking for me. At the door, she paused. Will you be at the Harrison benefit? In December? I think the Van Holts usually come to that one. He had exactly no basis for answering this question. Possibly, he said. It was nice meeting you, Ezra. You too. She went back in. He stood on the balcony for a long moment, looking at the city. He had done the thing. Brief and polite, technically. One conversation. Done. But the stone in his chest had gotten heavier rather than lighter. He prayed there on the balcony, for honesty, for clarity, that he was not making a mistake whose shape he could not yet see. Then he went in, found his way out, and took the subway back to the Bronx. He sat in the kitchen with his mother, drank tea, and told her nothing at all, which was its own kind of answer. Chapter 5. Complications. Sebastian's recording session had gone well. He came home the following morning at 7 a.m., still in his recording clothes, looking like someone who had been up all night and was not remotely sorry about it. He came into piano notes, not practicing, not working, just playing freely, the kind of sound a person makes when something inside them has been opened that had been closed for a long time. Ezra was waiting in the kitchen. How was it? Boss stopped. He looked at Ezra, and then he did something Ezra had never seen him do. Smiled without any irony, without the careful self-protection. It was everything. Garrett Lowe listened to my piece and said it had something real in it. Something earned. I've never had anyone say that. It's true. I hear you work. I can tell the difference between when you're going through motions and when you're working at something real. BS looked at him for a moment, then sat down. How was the gala? Ezra considered his answer. I talked to her. And I had a conversation with someone. It was brief. Was she? Don't. Let's just say the mission was accomplished and leave it there. BAS looked at him with the particular focus of someone reading a subtext. Was she nice? She was. Was she? Don't. BS leaned back and looked at the ceiling and then started laughing, quietly, with the exhaustion of someone who has been awake all night, but genuinely. Oh no. Nothing happened. We had a conversation. That's it. That is not the face of a person who had just a conversation. I have a neutral face. You have a very non-neutral face right now, Ezra. The arrangement is done. We're even. Sure, said Ba, in the tone of someone who does not believe a word of what they are agreeing to. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Celeste Beaumont messaged the Van Holt family email, which Ezra, as part of his household duties, was responsible for monitoring, 3 days later. It was addressed to Mrs. Van Holt, but mentioned the young man I spoke with at the gala, Ezra, I believe. It asked if Mrs. Van Holt might pass along his contact information, as she had enjoyed their conversation. Ezra read this email 3 times. Then he sat very still for a long moment. The obviously correct thing was to tell Mrs. Van Holt and let her respond appropriately. He composed, in his head, for different versions of how to bring this to her. Then he closed the laptop and went to find Sebastian. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She emailed the house? She emailed your mother, asking for my contact information. BS was at his piano bench, half-turned, looking at Ezra with something between impressed and concerned. And you're telling me this before you tell my mother. I am telling you this before I figure out what to tell your mother. There's a difference. BAS stood up and paced. What if my mother thinks you went to the gala representing the family? Like as my liaison, essentially? BAS, that is. She wouldn't be wrong, technically. You did go on behalf of the family. On behalf of you, without anyone's knowledge, pretending to be someone I'm not. Not pretending to be me specifically. We've been over this distinction. It is not as solid as you think. I'll handle my mother. And if Celeste wants to contact you, and you want to talk to her, then. And I want to talk to her, Ezra heard himself say. He hadn't meant to say it. It was simply true, and it came out before he could apply any filter. Boss stopped pacing. He looked at Ezra with an expression that was, for once, completely unguarded. Oh, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be a disaster. Which is not the same thing. Can it be both? Ezra did not answer because yes, obviously it could be both, and that was the problem. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He prayed about it that night, longer than usual. He spread out the full situation before God the way he'd seen his mother do it. Honestly, without trying to make it sound better than it was. He'd started something he shouldn't have. He'd allowed a false impression to take root. He'd told himself he wouldn't lie, and then hadn't corrected something that functioned as a lie. He knew what the right thing was. He could see it clearly, the way you can sometimes see the right path even when you don't want to take it. He asked God to give him courage. He asked God to keep things from going further than they already had. Then he lay in the dark and thought about her laugh, the real one, the sudden one. And he thought about gold light on fire escapes. And he thought about what she'd said, I just want to meet someone without knowing in advance why I'm supposed to like them. He thought she did. She just didn't know it. And the stone in his chest was no lighter. Chapter 6. Celeste. To understand Celeste Beaumont, you have to understand the apartment on 5th Avenue where she had grown up, which said almost everything. It was a pre-war building, 12 rooms, the kind of apartment that had hosted decades of careful, significant people, and consequently developed the atmosphere of a place that expects significance. Her father's study had leather chairs and photographs of him with various important men. The hallways had a smell of old books and fresh flowers, both maintained on schedule. Her parents were not unkind. They loved her very much, in the way of people who have strong opinions about what love requires. Her father, Alistair, wanted her to be successful in specific, legible ways. Her mother, Vivian, wanted her to be gracious and connected and to carry the Beaumont name the way they had carried it, with elegance and authority. What neither of them fully grasped was that she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to be remembered for the same reasons they had in mind. She wrote, in notebooks, in the margins of textbooks, on her phone at midnight when the right sentence came to her. She wrote the way some people played piano, not as a performance but as breathing, necessary, private. She wanted to study literature and eventually write something true. She had been told, kindly but clearly, that this was what weekends were for. She understood, without resentment, that they loved her. She was less sure they saw her. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She had thought about the man from the gala more than she would have admitted to anyone. It was not just that he'd been the most genuinely interesting person in the room. It was the specific quality of his attention. He had listened to her. Not in the way people listened when they were deciding what to say next, but the way you listen when what the other person is saying actually matters to you. And he'd said things, real things, about light and impermanence and noticing. She had almost not sent the email. She had written it and revised it twice and then felt embarrassed and closed the laptop. Then opened it again and sent it before she could be talked out of it. She was not, in general, someone who chased. But she was also not, in the privacy of her own heart, someone willing to let a good thing pass without reaching toward it. She had prayed about it. Celeste prayed, privately, not as performance, not as family ritual, but as something she'd come to on her own in a period of her life that had been harder than she showed the world. Her faith was quiet and mostly interior, and it was hers. She'd prayed that she'd hear something back, and that if she did, it would be honest. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She heard back within the week. A note from Eleanor Van Holt, passing along Ezra's personal number. The first text. Ezra, hi Celeste. This is Ezra from the gala. I hope this isn't strange. She smiled at the phone for approximately 7 seconds before responding. Celeste, not strange. I'm glad you reached out. Ezra, same. Can I ask you something? Celeste, yes. Ezra, you asked Mrs. Van Holt for my number before you knew I'd be okay with that. Was that scary? She laughed at the phone. Celeste, yes. Very. Was that weird to ask? Ezra, no. I just wanted you to know I'm glad you did it anyway. She looked at this message for a long moment. Then typed, Celeste, you're a strange person, Ezra. Ezra, I've heard worse things said about me. Celeste, I meant it as a compliment. Ezra, I know. That's why I'm okay with it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They texted every day after that. Then they started calling. Late evenings, when her parents were in the study, and she could sit on her window seat and talk without her voice carrying. He was funny in the way that good thinkers sometimes are. Not joke-telling funny, but observation funny. The kind that comes from looking at ordinary things at unusual angles. He made her see things she'd looked at 100 times as if for the first time. He told her about church, about his mother's faith, and how he'd developed his own. She listened and told him about hers. The way it had grown quieter and more personal as she'd gotten older. The way she found God less in services and more in the space between things. That's not uncommon. My mother says faith is a conversation that gets more private the longer it goes on. Your mother says beautiful things. Don't tell her that. She'll use it as leverage to make me pray more. She laughed. She noticed, in their conversations, that he was careful about certain things. He was open and genuine, but there were edges around certain topics that he navigated smoothly without seeming evasive. When she asked about his life, his home, he answered with truth, but a selective truth. A truth that told her who he was without fully telling her where he was from. She noticed but didn't push. She understood the impulse to be seen for yourself before you're contextualized. She herself had the opposite problem. Her context arrived before she did, and people had to work hard to see past it to her. She didn't know, yet, that his context and her context were as far apart as two people in the same city could be. She would find out. These things always come out. But for now, they were simply Celeste and Ezra. Two people who had found, in each other, the rare and slightly terrifying sensation of being genuinely known. Chapter 7. Sebastian sees her. It happened by accident, which is how the best and worst things always happen. Sebastian had been at Whitmore's winter social only because his mother had insisted with a degree of intensity that made it clear this was not a discussion. He'd gone with the intention of being present for exactly 40 minutes, and then manufacturing a headache. He had been doing this since he was 12. He was 25 minutes in, having a conversation with the son of his father's lawyer about something to do with squash, when he looked across the room and saw her. He did not know, at first glance, who she was. He knew she was wearing a dark green dress, and that her hair was up, and that she was smiling at someone with the kind of smile that you noticed because it was real. He knew she had a quality of self-possession that was different from the practiced composure of most girls in this room. It wasn't a wall, but a center. He watched her for approximately 30 seconds longer than was polite, and then looked away. Then looked back. The son of his father's lawyer said something about Hartford. Sebastian said He worked his way across the room over the following 15 minutes with the patience of someone who had planned military campaigns in chess. She was standing with a girl he recognized from Radcliffe Academy. Charlotte, he said to the girl he recognized. Then, to the other girl, I don't think we've met. Charlotte beamed the beam of someone witnessing two things she wanted to put together. Celeste, this is Sebastian Van Holt. Sebastian, Celeste Beaumont. And there it was. Her name. He felt something move through him that he couldn't immediately categorize, a kind of recognition without context. Van Holt, she said, something briefly crossing her expression. I know your family. Apparently everyone does. Is that annoying? He paused. Most people didn't ask that. Sometimes. I understand. I know what that's like. Matter-of-factly, not asking for sympathy. Just a shared observation. He looked at her with a different kind of attention. You're at Radcliffe? Yes. 6th form. You're at Whitmore? Unfortunately. She smiled, someone choosing in real time to find something genuinely amusing. I've heard it's not as terrible as its reputation. Who told you that? Someone I've been talking to recently. They were wrong. It is exactly as terrible. She laughed. Charlotte, gracefully, made an exit. Sebastian and Celeste talked for the rest of the event. He did not manufacture a headache. He forgot completely about the 40-minute strategy. He forgot, in fact, almost everything except the conversation he was having, which was the first conversation he'd had at a social event in recent memory that he hadn't wanted to leave. She was perceptive. She pushed back on things. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers and built on them, which was almost outrageously unusual. At the end of the evening, It was good to finally meet you, Sebastian. Finally? She smiled, and in the smile was something he couldn't read. Our families have apparently wanted us to meet for a while. And there it was. The thing he'd been avoiding for months, the arrangement, the expectation, the engineering, had arrived, and he had walked directly into it without knowing, and the catastrophically complicating thing was that it didn't feel like being maneuvered. It felt like discovering something. He went home and sat at his piano and didn't play anything. He sat for 20 minutes in the dark studio with his hands on his knees. Then he went to find Ezra. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Ezra was reading in the kitchen when Sebastian appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone who has had the kind of evening they hadn't anticipated. I met Celeste Beaumont. Ezra looked up from his book slowly. I know. I know. How do you? Sebastian stopped. He looked at Ezra, then looked at him again. Oh. The kitchen was very quiet. Oh, Sebastian said again more quietly. Oh no. Don't say it. I wasn't going to say anything. You were about to say something. B.S. sat down across from him. He pressed his hands flat on the table. How long have you been talking to her? Ezra said nothing. Ezra. How long? 3 weeks. The silence this time had a different quality. She thinks she's been talking to someone connected to our family. She has been. I am connected to your family. You know what I mean? Yes. B.S. ran both hands through his hair. Then, do you like her? It wasn't a question. The lack of question mark was intentional. Ezra closed his book. He set it carefully on the table. He looked at Sebastian with the expression of someone who is going to say a true thing and knows exactly how complicated it is. Yes. The word sat between them. She doesn't know who you are, B.S. said. Not accusatory. Factual. Like someone identifying a structural problem. No. And I met her tonight, and He stopped. I heard you, Ezra said quietly. I understood what you were going to say. Ba was silent. Very still, eyes focused on nothing. This is a problem. Yes. A significant one. Yes. What are we going to do? Ezra looked at him and said the honest thing he'd been circling for weeks. I think I need to tell her the truth. About who I am and where I'm from. Before this goes any further. And if that changes things, then that's what truth costs sometimes. My mother would say the same thing. They sat in the kitchen for a while longer. The city made its noises outside. Somewhere upstairs, the piano sat in the dark waiting. Neither of them said the thing that was also true. That B.A.S. had met her now, and something had shifted in him too, and that this triangle they were standing in was made of glass. Chapter 8. What Grace Said. Ezra went home to Fox Street on a Wednesday, a school half-day, his shift not until 3, because he needed his mother. Not advice exactly. He knew in a broad architectural sense what the right thing was. He needed something else, the thing his mother gave him that he couldn't get anywhere else, which was the sense of being completely known and completely accepted simultaneously, the specific grace of unconditional love. He found her in the kitchen at the table in her robe, her day off. Bible open, a cup of tea that had gone cold, writing in the margins of Psalms. She looked up when he came in, and her face did the thing it always did when she saw him. You look like you have something to tell me. He sat down. He put his hands on the table. He looked at them. I did something at work that I shouldn't have. And I didn't tell you because I knew what you would say, and I didn't want to hear it before I had to. She closed her Bible. She folded her hands on top of it. She waited. He told her everything. Not a version of it, everything. The letter, the gala, the suit, the lie that wasn't quite a lie but was Celeste, the texts and the calls, the 3 weeks of talking to someone who thought he was something he wasn't, and B.A.S. meeting her, and where they all now stood. He told it straight. He didn't perform remorse, which would have felt false, and he didn't minimize, which would have felt cowardly. He just told it. When he finished, his mother was quiet for a long time. He watched her face. He had looked at this face his whole life, and could read it the way you read your own handwriting. He watched her work through it. Not anger, not disappointment exactly, but something more considered. Something that looked like a woman praying with her eyes open. Finally she said, Do you know what Proverbs says about a false witness? Mama, I'm not scolding you. I want to know if you remember it. He did remember it. He was his mother's son. A false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will perish. Yes. And do you know what it says in the next verse? It says, Many seek an audience with a ruler, but it is from the Lord that one gets justice. She let that sit, which means correction does not always come from the people who know your lie. Sometimes it comes from God first. And the grace in that is that you have time to correct it yourself before he has to. He sat with this. I was going to tell her. When? The when was the question. The when was everything. I don't know. You kept telling yourself you would tell her and not setting a time, because setting a time makes it real, and not setting one means you don't have to feel the cost of it yet. Yes. She reached across the table and covered his hands with hers. Ezra, I know why you did it. I know what it feels like to be in a room and want, for once, to not have people know your circumstances before they know you. I know that. Your father and I, before he left, she stopped. She took a breath. There is no shame in wanting to be known for who you are. But the way you went about it was wrong. Yes. And you know that. But knowing it and not fixing it is where one wrong becomes a character. And you are not that character. He looked at his mother. What do I do? You tell her the truth. All of it. As soon as you can. Not a careful version. Not the most flattering arrangement of the facts. The full thing. She's going to feel deceived. Because she was. That is true. And you don't get to manage her response to a true thing. She gets to feel what she feels. He sat with this too. And if she doesn't, then she doesn't. And you will survive it. People survive the consequences of honest things. It is the consequences of dishonest things that can break a person permanently. She squeezed his hands. You are a good person, Ezra Osei. Good people make mistakes. What makes them good is not the absence of mistakes, but what they do when they make them. He nodded. He felt, in his chest, the familiar sensation of his mother's words landing where faith lived. The place that was not his head, but not quite his heart either. That internal territory that had no better name than the soul. Pray with me, she said. He closed his eyes. She prayed for him the way she always had. Not politely, not with prepared words, but with the urgent directness of someone who believed God was actually listening. She prayed for courage. She prayed for the right words at the right time. She prayed for the girl by name, Celeste, and for God to protect her heart through what was coming, because even when truth is the right thing it can hurt, and God cares about what hurts. He sat in the warm kitchen of Fox Street, his mother's hands over his, and felt, beneath the anxiety, beneath the dread, something that was not peace exactly but was close to it. The peace of having been seen completely and loved anyway. The peace of knowing what the right thing was and deciding to do it. Amen, he said. Amen. She let go of his hands and picked up her cold tea. You want me to heat this up? Please. She stood and went to the stove. Normal morning. Normal kitchen. Chapter 9. The truth arrives, mostly uninvited. He had planned to tell her on Friday. He had the words arranged, had thought about it for days. He was going to ask if they could meet in person and sit across from her and say, There's something I need to tell you, and I should have told you weeks ago, and I'm telling you now because you deserve that. This was the plan. The plan became irrelevant on Thursday. Asterisk. Mrs. Van Holt called him into her sitting room at 10 in the morning with an expression that was pleasant on the surface and careful underneath. Ezra, I've been meaning to speak with you about something. His chest did the thing it did before difficult things. Of course, it has come to my attention that you and Celeste Beaumont have been in contact. He kept his face level. Yes. Since the gala. Yes. Mrs. Van Holt was not angry. She was something more complex. A woman who had engineered a social situation that had produced an unexpected outcome and was deciding what she thought about it. May I ask how that happened? This was it. This was the wall. He could feel it. He thought of his mother. He thought of everything she had said. He said, I attended the gala on Sebastian's behalf. He had a prior commitment that I understood was important to him. I thought it was a terrible idea, and I told him so. But I went, and I met Celeste, and she reached out afterward. I should have told you immediately. I didn't. I apologize for that. Mrs. Van Holt was very still. Sebastian asked you to go in his place. Yes. Does Celeste know who you are? Where you work? The pause before his answer was its own answer. No, not fully. She knows my name and that I have a connection to your family. She doesn't know the nature of that connection. I've been planning to correct that. When? Again, not a question. Today. Or tomorrow. Very soon. Mrs. Van Holt looked at him for a long moment. He held it, eye contact, steady, not defensive. He was who he was, and he'd done what he'd done, and he was not going to look away from either. She said finally, You need to speak to her today. Yes. And Sebastian and I need to have a separate conversation. Yes. She stood. He stood. At the door she paused. For what it's worth, she has spoken very warmly of you. To her mother, who told me. Whatever she knows and doesn't know about you, she has seen something real. He nodded. He didn't trust himself to say anything. Go. Go do the right thing, Ezra. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He texted Celeste from the sidewalk outside the Van Holt house, in the cold November afternoon. Ezra, can we meet today? I need to tell you something. It's important, and I should have said it earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't. Celeste, now I'm nervous. Ezra, you have a right to be. Not because I've done something terrible, but because I wasn't fully honest with you about some things and you deserve better than that. A longer pause. Celeste, the coffee place on 79th. 3 o'clock. Ezra, I'll be there. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The coffee place on 79th was warm and quiet in the mid-afternoon lull. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea and her coat still on, looking up when he came in with an expression that was carefully composed over something more uncertain. He sat down. He didn't order anything. He didn't perform small talk or delay. He said, I don't work for the Van Holt family in the way you might have assumed. I work as a household assistant. I run errands. I help around the house. I'm paid weekly. I live in the Bronx. I grew up there, my mother and I, Fox Street in the South Bronx. We don't have money. We have never had money. When I met you at the gala, I was there because Sebastian, my friend, because we have become friends, had something he couldn't miss and asked me to go in his place. He needed someone to meet you. I went. I told myself I wasn't lying because I wasn't saying false things, just not correcting the impression the setting created. That was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I was doing it, and I did it anyway. And then I talked to you every day for 3 weeks, and I kept not telling you because I didn't want to lose the version of this where you saw me before you knew all the context. Which is not a justification. It's just true. The coffee shop was quiet. Someone somewhere was grinding beans. The sound of the city came in muffled from outside. Celeste was looking at him. Her expression had moved through several things while he was talking. He had watched it, helplessly, not looking away. He had watched the composure shift, and something underneath its surface, and something under that surface that he couldn't name. She said nothing for a moment. Then, Fox Street. Yes. And Sebastian asked you to go to the gala. Not posing as him. Just going and not correcting the context. She was quiet again. She looked at her tea. Everything you told me. The things about yourself, the music, the light, the things you believe, was any of that. All of it was true. Every single thing I told you about myself was true. I didn't invent a person. I just didn't give you all the information about where that person lives. She looked at the table. He watched her. He had promised himself he would not fill the silence with reassurances. He would let her feel what she was going to feel. It was one of the harder things he had ever done. She finally looked up. I need to go. Okay. I'm not going to say what I think right now, because I'm not sure yet. That's fair. Don't apologize again. You already did. I heard it. I just need time. Okay. She stood. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. At the door, she stopped without turning. She said, quietly enough that he almost didn't hear it. The things you said about the light. About noticing things because you know they might not stay. Was that real? Yes. That was completely real. She pushed through the door. He sat at the corner table and did not move for a while. Then he bowed his head. In the coffee shop, quietly, without performance, he prayed. He gave it to God, the whole thing, the weight of it, the not knowing what came next. Help her. That was the core of the prayer. Whatever comes next, help her. Chapter 10. The distance. She didn't reach out for 8 days. He counted. He didn't mean to count. He was not the kind of person who counted days in the way of someone waiting desperately for word. He was too disciplined and too proud for that. But he counted. He went to school. He went to the Van Holts. He talked to Sebastian, who was navigating his own difficult conversation with his mother, and had emerged from it with a new understanding of the word accountable. Mrs. Van Holt had been less angry than Ba expected. She had been more disappointed, which was worse, and had told him, in the careful, precise language of a woman who said what she meant, that he had used Ezra, and that using people who trusted you was a failure of character that needed to be sat with seriously. B.S. had told Ezra this with an expression that said he had, in fact, been sitting with it. She said failure of character. My mother, who loves me. Because she loves you, Ezra said. I know. It was still a lot. You did use me. I know. I let myself be used. which is its own thing. I'm not angry with you. I just want us to be honest about what it was. Bas nodded. When you told her, did she mention me? No. He was quiet. She will. He was right. But for now there was the silence. 8 days of it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. On the 9th day a text arrived. Celeste, are you free Saturday afternoon? He looked at the message for a long time. Then, Ezra, yes. Celeste, the park. The entrance on 72nd, East Side. 2 p.m. He was there at 1:50. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. She was there at 2:01. She walked up in a coat the color of autumn leaves, and she looked like she had been thinking for 8 days, which she had. She looked tired in the way people look tired after thinking very hard about something that mattered. They walked. Not toward anywhere specific, just the path through the park, leaves down, bare branches, the pale winter light. She spoke first. I've been trying to be fair. To myself, mostly. It's easy to feel deceived and stop there. But I kept thinking about what you said, that everything you told me was true. And I went back over all of it, trying to find something that wasn't, and I couldn't. He said nothing. He walked. But it still feels like a complication. Of something I trusted. He nodded. I know. And the thing with Sebastian. My family wanted me to meet Sebastian Van Holt. And instead I met you. And you work for him. Yes. That is very complicated, Ezra. I know. What Sebastian did was wrong. He knows that. He's not a bad person. He made a selfish decision that set off a chain of things he didn't anticipate. Which doesn't make it okay. She started walking again. I met him. At the Whitmore social. We talked for a long time. And I didn't know. She stopped. She made a small sound that was not quite a laugh. I talked to Sebastian Van Holt for 2 hours and thought he was interesting and funny, and I felt guilty because I thought I should be thinking about you, and instead here I was thinking about this other person. She stopped talking. He stopped walking. They stood on the path and looked at each other. He said very quietly, I know about that too. She stared at him. He told you. He came home and told me. He didn't know who you were at first. He met you and then figured it out, and then yes. He told me. Her expression was doing something complex. So you both knew. About each other. Yes. And neither of you told me. He held her gaze. I was going to. I was planning to tell you everything, including that. I was slower than I should have been. She looked away at the bare trees. I don't know what to do with any of this. That's a fair response. Do you know what the most frustrating part is? Tell me. That the way I feel about talking to you hasn't changed. Which feels ridiculous given the circumstances. He said nothing for a moment. Then, it doesn't feel ridiculous to me. She looked back at him. They stood in the park in the cold winter light, and the city hummed around them, and the leaves were all down, and everything was bare and clear. The way things get in winter when the cover is gone, and what's there is what there is. I need more time, she said. Okay. I'm not saying no to whatever this is. I'm saying I need to sit with all of it. I understand. And Ezra? Yeah. The light on Fox Street. The 6 minutes in the morning. I want to see that someday. He looked at her. She looked back. If you'll show me, she said. He nodded. Once. Slowly. I'll show you. Chapter 11. Sebastian's problem. The thing about Sebastian Van Holt that nobody in his social world fully appreciated was that underneath the irony and the casual intelligence and the practiced indifference to expectations, he had a conscience that was both overactive and badly treated. He had spent most of his life treating it like a mildly inconvenient roommate, acknowledging its presence while doing whatever he wanted, and then feeling vaguely bad about it later. This had worked reasonably well as a strategy for approximately 17 years. It was not working anymore. The conversation with his mother had opened something up. Her phrase, failure of character, had lodged in him the way something lodges when it's precisely true. Not comfortable, not dismissible, just sitting there with the patience of an accurate thing. He had used Ezra. This was a fact. Ezra was his friend, genuinely his friend, the first person his age in recent memory who hadn't wanted something from him that had anything to do with the Van Holt name, and he had deployed him like a social instrument because it was convenient and because he had not fully thought through what he was asking of someone in Ezra's position. Someone in a borrowed suit, in a room full of people who would assume he belonged, carrying a weight of performance that nobody had asked about. He sat with this. He also sat with the other thing, that he had met Celeste Beaumont and something had happened in him that he hadn't given himself permission to examine. He understood it was complicated. He understood that Ezra had feelings for her, had told the truth, and was waiting in the particular painful patience of someone who had done the right thing and didn't know yet if it would be received. He also understood that what he felt when he talked to Celeste was real. That was the inconvenient part. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He called her. He told himself it was to apologize. It was partly to apologize. But he also knew, with the honesty he rarely applied to himself, that he called because he wanted to hear her voice, and that was a problem. She answered after 3 rings. Sebastian, I owe you an apology. A pause. Go ahead. He took a breath. I sent Ezra to the gala because I wanted to avoid meeting you. Not because of anything about you specifically, because I resented being told who I should meet and being expected to feel something on schedule. That was my issue, and I handled it badly. I used Ezra in a way that wasn't fair to him, and it set off a chain of things that hurt you. I'm sorry for that. Genuinely. She was quiet for a moment. That was a good apology. I practiced. A shorter pause. Then, almost against her will. Did you really? 4 times. I kept getting defensive in the middle of it. She made a sound that was close to a laugh. I appreciate you saying it. Celeste. Don't. I haven't said anything yet. I can hear where you're going. He was quiet. What happened when we talked at the Whitmore event was real. For me, I mean. And I don't know what to do with that because of everything else that is also real. I know. Ezra is someone I care about. I don't know in what way yet. But I care about him, and you're his friend, and this is very complicated. Yes. He sat in his room, looking at the wall of the studio where his piano was. He thought about integrity, about what his mother had said, about what Garrett Lowe had said the night of the recording session, about music that was earned, about the things worth having being the things that cost you something. He said, I'm not going to pursue this. Whatever I felt when we talked, I'm not going to make it your problem or his. You're both already dealing with enough. And he's my friend, and he's the one who told you the truth, and that matters more than what I want right now. She was quiet for a long time. Sebastian. Yeah, that was also good. I'm having a strong fortnight for speeches. This time she did laugh. Short and real. I think I'd like to be your friend. At some point. When this is all less tangled. I think we could be good at that. Yeah, I think so too. He hung up and sat in the quiet of his room and felt something that was not exactly peace but was close to it. The specific feeling of having chosen integrity over desire and finding that the choice didn't hollow you out the way you expected. Finding that it had a weight of its own that was, in some complicated way, sustaining. He went to the piano. He played, not from the pieces he was working on but freely, following the feeling the way Garrett Lowe had told him to. Let the music be an honest document. Let it say what words won't. He played for 2 hours. When he stopped, he had written something. He named it, after a moment of thought, 74th Street Winter. He would, some years later, consider it the best thing he had ever composed. But that is a different story. Chapter 12. Fox Street. She came on a Saturday in early December, when the light was right. She took the 6 train to the Bronx for the first time in her life, which she told him when he met her at the station. The honest admission of someone who is aware of the geography of their own privilege without being defensive about it. He appreciated the honesty. He was learning to expect it from her. They walked from the station. He pointed things out. The bakery that had been there since his grandmother's time, the church his mother attended, the community garden that the kids on the block had built with painted bricks and unexpected flowers. She was quiet. She watched. She asked real questions. She asked about his father, which nobody usually asked, and he told her, honestly, briefly, that he'd left when Ezra was 9 and they weren't in contact, and that it had shaped him, but he'd been determined not to let it define him. Did that work? Mostly. My mother helped. And, he gestured upward, a small gesture that meant something specific to him. She understood it immediately. Faith. Yeah. They reached Fox Street. He pointed out the window of the apartment. She looked up at the building, 5 stories of worn brick, fire escapes, the beauty of a place that has held a lot of living. 3rd floor? Yeah. Far left window. I want to see it. The light. You'd have to come back at about 7 a.m. Then I will. He looked at her. You mean that? I mean most things I say. He believed her. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. His mother was home. He had told her, with care and some nervousness, that he was bringing someone by. She had said, bring her by then. The apartment was clean and warm and smelled of the food his mother made when she wanted to welcome someone, a Ghanaian stew, which filled the stairwell before they even reached the door. His mother opened the door before they knocked. She looked at Celeste. Celeste looked at her. There was a moment that Ezra could not fully describe afterward. Something passed between the two women in the space of about 3 seconds, the way things sometimes pass between people who are both very perceptive and in the same room for the first time. Mrs. Osei, thank you for having me. Come in, come in. I made food. You'll eat. This was not a question. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lunch was one of the longest and warmest meals Ezra could remember. His mother was extraordinarily present. She asked Celeste about herself with genuine interest and no agenda. She listened the way Ezra listened, which was the way she had taught him. She laughed at Celeste's stories and told her own, and brought out photographs that Ezra tried to stop her from showing and failed. Celeste held a photograph of Ezra at 7, gap-toothed and grinning on the fire escape. You were so. Don't. You look so happy. He looked at the photograph. He had forgotten that photograph existed. We were having a hard summer, his mother said thoughtfully. Money troubles. Hot. But he would always find the thing to smile at. She looked at Ezra with love. He has always been like that. He finds the thing worth noticing. Celeste looked at Ezra. He looked at the photograph. After lunch, while his mother washed up, he and Celeste sat at the kitchen table with their tea and talked. Easily, naturally, the way they had on the phone, but different in the presence of the actual room, the actual street outside the window, the actual life. She's wonderful. I know. She raised you. Yeah. I can tell. He looked at her. Celeste. Yeah. I'm sorry. Again. Not because you asked, but because I keep thinking about it and I keep being sorry. She looked at him. I know that you are. I should have led with this. All of this. Ezra. I spent 3 weeks talking to a person who was real. Everything you showed me was real. Where you're from and what you have and what you don't have. That would have been context for what I was seeing, not a replacement for it. I'm not saying it was fine. I'm saying I understand why it happened. And I understand that it came from wanting to be seen, not from wanting to deceive. Those are different. He was quiet. How are you so clear about this? I'm not always. I've thought about it a lot. And I prayed about it. Yeah. I do that. More than people know. Me too, he said. She smiled. The real one. The sudden one. He thought, okay. Here. This is what I've been afraid to lose, and it's still here. His mother reappeared from the kitchen and looked at the two of them at the table and made a very deliberate effort not to look pleased about what she saw. She poured herself tea and sat down and said, Celeste, tell me about your family. And Celeste did. She told about the apartment on 5th Avenue and her father's photographs and her mother's flowers and the pressure and the love that came mixed together. She told it honestly, including the complicated parts. Grace Osei listened and nodded, and at one point said quietly, every family is trying to love each other well and getting it partly wrong. The grace is in the trying. Celeste looked at her. I'm going to write that down. Please do. Ezra watched them and felt something so warm in his chest he almost couldn't breathe. He looked at the window. Outside, Fox Street was doing its ordinary afternoon things, buses and voices and children and life. All of it completely itself, completely his, completely enough. Thank you, he thought. Not to anyone in the room. Just, thank you. Chapter 13. Made in Manhattan. December in New York is something that has to be experienced to be understood. Not the Christmas card version, though that exists. The real thing, which is the smell of hot chestnuts and diesel on the same corner, which is the way the cold makes the city sharper and louder and more itself, which is the way the lights come on early because darkness arrives early, and the city responds by making itself brighter. All of it at once. All of it impossible and real. Ezra was on the roof of the Van Holt house on a Wednesday evening, standing at the railing with his hands in his pockets, watching Manhattan do what Manhattan did. He heard the door behind him. Sebastian appeared beside him, also with his hands in his pockets, also watching the city. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. She's happy, B.S. said. What? Celeste. She texted me. We've been doing the friend thing. She said she's happy. Ezra said nothing. He felt the warmth move through him. Good, he said. She said you're going to the Harrison benefit together. Like she's bringing you. Yeah. Do you have a suit? I'll figure it out. Take one of mine. The dark gray. It fits better than the navy did. Ezra looked at him. This time I'm asking. There's a difference. Ezra looked back at the city. Yeah, there is. Another silence. The kind that settles. My mother told me she's inviting your mother to the Foundation's Christmas event. She said she'd like to meet her properly. Does your mother know what she's getting into? I warned her that your mother would probably correct her at least once about something she thought was settled wisdom. Once is conservative. I know. I said it to prepare her, not to predict. Ezra smiled. How's the music? I played something for my father last night. Ezra looked at him. This was significant. Richard Van Holt and music was a long, uncomfortable story. And V.S. was quiet for a moment. He didn't say much, but he listened the whole way through. And at the end he said, I didn't know you could do that. That's something. Yeah. That's a lot, actually. Yeah. The city glittered below them. Ezra. Yeah. I'm sorry. For how this started. For using you. I've said it, and I'll keep saying it until it lands the way it should. It landed. A while ago. Still noted. BAS nodded. You're my friend. Yeah, BAS. You're mine. Asterisk. The Harrison benefit was the first Saturday in December. The dark gray suit fit him well. He stood on the steps of the venue and waited for Celeste, and thought about the last time he'd stood outside a venue like this in a borrowed suit, the terror and the wrongness of it, and how different this felt. He was still the boy from Fox Street. He was still his mother's son. He still counted every luxury and prayed over every gift and carried the weight of a life that had required him to be resourceful and careful and grateful. None of that had changed. What had changed was that he was here as himself. Not pretending. Not managing. Just Ezra Emmanuel Osei, in a borrowed suit that his friend had offered, on his way inside with the girl he had been honest with. A car pulled up. She got out. She was wearing a dress the color of winter cream, and she walked toward him, and she was looking at him the way she had in the park, that steady, perceptive look that said she was seeing what was actually there. Hi, she said. Hi. She tilted her head. You look good. I feel different this time. Different how? Like myself. She smiled. The sudden bright one. The real one. Good. That's who I wanted to come. He offered her his arm, which he had never done before in his life, but which felt, in this moment, like the natural thing. She took it. They went inside. Celeste's parents were there. Celeste Beaumont was a tall man with the bearing of someone who had arranged many outcomes in his life, and expected this to be one of them. He looked at Ezra with the measured gaze of someone making a rapid assessment. Vivian Beaumont was warmer and shook Ezra's hand with genuine attention. You're the young man Celeste has been talking about. I hope in reasonable terms. Very reasonable ones. Celeste Beaumont said. You work for the Van Holts. Yes, sir. I help with the household. I'm also in my final year of school. I'm planning to study urban architecture at CUNY in the fall. He had said this out loud for the first time. He had applied in October and hadn't told anyone, not wanting to carry the expectation. But here, standing in front of Celeste's father, it felt important to say. To name where he was going. Celeste Beaumont looked at him. CUNY's architecture program is well regarded. It is. They also offer me a path I can actually take, financially. Which matters. He said it simply. No apology. No over-explanation. Just the fact, held clearly. Celeste Beaumont looked at him for one more moment. Then he nodded, a short, deliberate nod that said he had seen something and filed it. Good evening, then. Good evening, sir. Celeste beside him exhaled very slightly. He felt it. Her mother leaned in and said quietly, He's difficult with everyone at first. Give him time. Ezra said, I have time. Vivian Beaumont smiled like she had heard something she liked. Later in the evening, he stood at the edge of the room with a glass of water, watching it the way he had learned to watch rooms, for its rhythms and relationships and the way people moved through it. Celeste appeared beside him. How are you doing? Good. This is a lot, but good. You handled my father well. I just told the truth. That's usually the best approach with him. He respects directness more than polish. Good to know. She was quiet for a moment. The room glittered around them. I keep thinking about what your mother said. About every family getting love partly wrong. She says things like that. I wrote it down. And I thought about how I almost let the circumstances of how we met keep me from actually being here. With you. He looked at her. I'm glad you didn't. Me too. Ezra. The light on Fox Street. I want to see it. I know. And I'll show you. When? Saturday. 7 a.m. Dress warm. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were warm. Okay, she said. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Saturday was cold and clear in the way December mornings sometimes are in New York. A sharp blue sky and frost on the fire escapes and the streets quiet enough that you could hear your own footsteps. She arrived at 6:55, which meant she had been nervous and early, which he found deeply endearing and didn't say. They went up. His mother was already awake, she always was, and made them tea and then, with the gracious wisdom of a woman who understood things, found reasons to be in the back of the apartment. They stood at the window of Ezra's room. 6:59, he watched the clock on his phone. 7 o'clock. And there it was. The light came in sideways, the way it always did, through the gap between the buildings. It cut gold across the fire escapes, and turned everything it touched briefly, impossibly luminous. It lasted exactly 6 minutes. For in a half of those minutes, neither of them said a word. At some point, without either of them planning it, her hand was next to his on the windowsill. Not holding. Just next to. Close enough. Oh, she said softly after a while. Yeah, I understand now. Why you notice it. Why you notice things. You have this gift of paying attention. I don't think you know how rare that is. He looked at her profile, the way she was watching the light, still, as if she didn't want to look away and miss it. He thought, this is what the 6 minutes are for. Not for me alone. For this. The light shifted. The gold began to soften toward gray. The fire escapes went back to being fire escapes. He turned away from the window. She didn't turn yet. She watched until it was fully gone. Then she turned. Thank you. For showing me that. Thank you for wanting to see it. They stood in the ordinary morning light of a room on Fox Street in the Bronx, and it was the most natural thing in the world. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. There is a particular story that New York tells about itself, which is the story of reinvention, that you can come here and be remade, that the city is large enough for every version of yourself, that who you were is not who you must remain. It is a good story. It is partly true. But what Ezra Osei learned, in the winter of his 17th year, in a borrowed suit and a borrowed gala and the long, complicated territory of a truth he'd been slow to tell, what he learned was something different. Not that he could be remade by proximity to wealth or beauty or a girl who noticed things, but that who he already was enough. Was, in fact, the very thing. The boy from Fox Street. His mother's son. The one who noticed the 6 minutes of light and kept index cards of the things God said to him in the quiet, and played chess in a rich man's kitchen, and told the truth, eventually, even when it cost something. That boy was not incomplete. He was not in progress toward some final polished version. He was Ezra Emanuel Osei, and he was already precisely made. Not by Manhattan. Not by the Van Holts or the Beaumonts or anyone else's life that he'd borrowed the edges of for a season. Made by love. Made by grace. Made by the God who looks at the heart and finds, there, something worth calling good. End. For the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7.